They would never be a burden on me. In the icy darkness of the forest, with the moon hidden by thick clouds, the ambitious uncle pushed the makeshift basket away, the creak of the wicker breaking the deadly silence. Inside, two tiny hearts beat in despair, the newborn twins abandoned to a cruel fate. Their faint cries were lost in the distant howl of the wind as the shadowy figure disappeared. But when the night seemed to consume them, a pair of golden eyes gleamed in the gloom, and what was revealed was not imminent death, but an unexpected guardian whose roar would change everything. The lion's roar, deep and resonant, was not a hunting cry, but a lament that pierced the night's stillness. His golden eyes fixed on the small basket, from which came the most fragile sounds he had ever heard. A primitive instinct of protection began to stir within him. The icy wind whipped through the forest, and the lion, with his vast flowing mane, approached cautiously. He sniffed the air, catching the sweet, vulnerable scent of the newborns. The tiny cries, now more audible, seemed to strike an invisible chord in his wild chest. With surprising delicacy, he lowered his head, nuzzling his muzzle against the edge of the basket. His sensitive whiskers brushed the thin fabric covering the babies, and a protective urgency flooded his being. He didn't see them as prey, but as something that needed his strength. As the temperature dropped, threatening the lives of the fragile beings, the lion lay down beside the basket. His massive, warm, furry body formed a barrier against the biting cold and the merciless wind. He watched the babies intently, his eyes fixed on the tiny red faces that barely moved. From time to time, a soft growl, almost a purr, escaped his throat, calming the little ones for an instant. The scene was surreal, the wild majesty of nature in its tenderest role. Not far away, on their routine night patrol, forest rangers Elias and Marta felt an unusual chill. It wasn't just the cold, but a peculiar roar that echoed through the forest. It wasn't a roar of hunting or confrontation, but different, laden with a strange melancholy and undeniable authority. "Did you hear that, Marta?" Elias asked, his experienced eyes scanning the darkness. "It sounded like a lion. But around here, that's very unusual." Marta, with years of service, nodded, her brow furrowed. "Yes, Elias, and it wasn't a threatening roar. It sounded more like a call. Something is wrong." Guided by an intuition that rarely failed them, they adjusted their flashlights and followed the sound, their careful footsteps breaking dry twigs on the forest floor. Marta's heart beat faster. There was something about that sound that pulled her, the feeling that lives depended on that call. As they approached, faint, almost inaudible infant cries mingled with the whisper of the wind. Elias and Marta exchanged astonished glances. Babies? In the forest? Disbelief turned into urgency. They quickened their pace, caution mixed with a desperate need to understand. And then, through the sparse foliage, the light from their flashlights revealed a sight that would defy all logic and belief. There he was, the lion, imposing and serene, lying beside a small basket. His eyes, once gleaming in the gloom, now reflected the flashlight beams, revealing vigilance and, surprisingly, protection. Inside the basket, wrapped in a thin blanket, were the two babies, their tiny, pale faces, but still breathing. The scene was so powerful and inexplicable that Elias and Marta stopped, frozen, unable to process what they saw. The lion, king of the jungle, unexpected guardian, had fulfilled his silent promise. With the arrival of the humans, the twins' fate was about to change. The forest, witness to cruelty, was the stage for a miracle. The tense silence hung for an instant that seemed eternal, broken only by the faint cries of the newborns. Elias was the first to move, a shiver running through his body. He raised his hand, a slow and cautious gesture, as if he feared that any sudden movement might undo the unbelievable scene before his eyes. Marta, her eyes welling up, felt her heart clench. The sight of the helpless little beings, protected by such a majestic predator, was something that defied reason, but touched the soul in a profound way. She took a step forward, her voice choked with emotion. "The babies. They're alive, Elias." The lion, sensing their approach, raised his head. His golden eyes, previously fixed on the twins, now turned to the rangers. There was no aggression in his gaze, only attentive vigilance, almost a silent permission. He let out a low growl, a sound that seemed more like a gentle warning rather than a threat. Elias, with years of experience in the forest, understood. The animal was there to protect, not to attack. "Calmly, Marta. Don't startle him," he whispered, slowly extending his hand to the flashlight he held, dimming the light's intensity so as not to dazzle the lion. Marta knelt, her hands trembling as she approached the basket. The lion watched her every move, but did not retreat. His presence was a living shield. With delicacy, Marta extended a finger and touched one of the baby's tiny hands, which clung to it with surprising strength. A wave of love and despair washed over her. Their tiny faces were pale and purplish from the cold, but there was life in their little chests, rising and falling with short, rapid breaths. "We need to get them out of here, Elias. They're freezing." Elias nodded, reaching for the radio to call for backup. But his voice faltered as he tried to describe what he was witnessing. How to explain a guardian lion? He approached the basket, his eyes meeting the lion's for a brief moment. There was an intelligence and compassion in those eyes that left him speechless. The lion, as if understanding the urgency, moved slowly, stepping back a few paces, but without ceasing to watch them. It was a graceful retreat, an act of trust that surprised the rangers. With the path clear, Marta carefully picked up the basket. The babies, a boy and a girl, were wrapped in the thin blanket, now damp and icy. She nestled them against her chest, trying to transfer her own warmth. Elias, with a racing heart, took off his heavy coat and wrapped it around the basket, adding a vital layer of protection. The baby's cries, previously faint, now intensified, a painful sound that pierced the soul. As they moved away from the clearing, the lion remained there, a majestic silhouette in the gloom, his golden eyes following their every step until they were out of sight. It was as if his mission was accomplished, but his vigilance still persisted. Elias and Marta walked briskly, the weight of the babies in their arms and the weight of disbelief in their minds. Who could be capable of such an act of cruelty? That act of abandonment, so unthinkable, would soon be uncovered. At the forest ranger station, the arrival of Elias and Marta with the babies caused a commotion. The team doctor, Dr. Ricardo, a middle-aged man with glasses perched on his nose, quickly assessed the situation. His eyes widened at the sight of the little ones, so fragile. "Quick, we need to warm them and stabilize them immediately. Severe hypothermia," he instructed, his voice firm and urgent. While the nurses prepared incubators and thermal blankets, Marta and Elias recounted the unbelievable story of the lion. At first, there was skepticism, but the seriousness on their faces and the evidence of the babies rescued from the deep forest soon dispelled the doubts. The news would spread like wildfire, but for now, the priority was life. That lion was not just a guardian, but a herald of justice, and his story was already beginning to weave itself into the heart of the community. At the ranger station, the bustle was palpable. Dr. Ricardo, with nimble hands and a serious demeanor, coordinated the team. The tiny twins were quickly taken to a heated room where thermal blankets and incubators awaited. Every second was crucial. Marta, her heart pounding, watched the movement, her hands clasped against her chest. Elias, by her side, tried to process the avalanche of emotions and the need to officially report what had happened. The lion's story, so surreal, needed to be told. But how? While doctors fought to stabilize the baby's body temperature, Elias began his account. His voice, initially choked with emotion, gained firmness as he described the scene. The majestic lion, the silent guardian, the basket with the fragile newborns. His fellow rangers, accustomed to stories of hunting or animal rescues, listened in stunned silence. Some shook their heads in disbelief, but Elias's determined gaze and Marta's emotional confirmation dispelled any doubt. "He didn't attack us," Marta explained. Her voice choked. "He just watched us, as if he knew we were there to help his charges." The news of the miraculous rescue began to leak out, reaching the ears of the local police chief, Inspector Almeida. A pragmatic and skeptical man by nature, Almeida initially dismissed the lion's story as an exaggeration. However, the seriousness of Elias and Marta's report and the medical confirmation of the baby's critical condition forced him to consider the unthinkable. Babies abandoned in the forest in the middle of winter, and a lion acting as a babysitter. It was unprecedented. The priority now was the twins' health and the identification of those responsible for such cruelty. While the little ones fought for their lives, warmed by blankets and the medical team's care, the lion's story transformed into a buzz of hope and mystery. The local community, small and close-knit, was shocked. Who would have the heart to abandon such innocent children? The question echoed in every conversation, in every worried glance. The nurses, with tears in their eyes, cared for the babies as if they were their own children. Their gentle gestures and sweet voices trying to compensate for the initial abandonment. Dr. Ricardo, upon verifying the twins' gradual improvement, felt immense relief. "They are little warriors," he murmured, stroking one of their foreheads. "They had a very special guardian." Inspector Almeida's investigation began discreetly, but with determination. He knew that such a heinous act would not go unpunished. The lion's story, though fantastic, was the key to locating the babies and, consequently, identifying the culprit. The forest, once a scene of abandonment, was now the epicenter of a search for justice. Elias and Marta, exhausted but with their duty done, promised to cooperate fully. The image of the lion, protective and majestic, imprinted itself on their minds, a vivid reminder that goodness can emerge in the most unexpected places, and nature, in its wisdom, can offer the purest redemption. They knew that the twins' journey was just beginning, and that the truth about their abandonment would soon come to light, revealing greed and the force of destiny. The tiny twins, now under the attentive care of the medical team, began to show signs of a slow but steady recovery. Provisionally named by the nurses as Anjo and Estrella, their names echoed the hope that blossomed amidst the tragedy. Dr. Ricardo, with a tired but visibly satisfied smile, observed the incubators. Their tiny faces, once pale and purplish, were gaining a rosier hue, and their little lungs, which had struggled so much, now filled with stronger, more regular breaths. The nurses, with an almost maternal tenderness, changed diapers, whispered lullabies, and caressed their tiny hands, feeling a deep connection and a burning desire to compensate for the abandonment they suffered. Each of their gestures was a balm, a reminder that the world could also be a place of warmth and protection. Outside the walls of the ranger station, the story of the lion and the twins spread like an uncontrollable wildfire. In the squares, markets, and churches, people spoke of the miracle with voices full of awe and disbelief. "A lion!" they exclaimed, their eyes wide with wonder, unable to grasp the magnitude of that act of wild protection. The image of the majestic animal guarding the helpless little ones touched everyone's hearts, transforming the act of abandonment into a tale of hope and redemption. The community, which had once felt the pain of cruelty, now united in an unprecedented wave of solidarity. Donations of clothes, diapers, and toys began to pour in, a constant flow of love and support for the Lions babies, as they affectionately came to be called. As the public commotion grew, Inspector Almeida delved into the investigation with grim seriousness. He was a man of facts and evidence, and the Lions story, though moving, was not legal proof. His team scoured the forest, searching for any clue that might lead to the responsible party for such barbarity. "Someone left them there," he repeated to himself, his eyes fixed on the area map, tracing possible escape routes. It wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate act of cruelty. The few clues, the thin blanket and the basket without identification marks, made the task arduous. However, the image of the fragile babies, whom he had briefly visited, fueled his determination. He knew the truth was hidden somewhere, and he would unearth it no matter the cost. Far away, in his isolated mansion, Arthur, the widowed uncle, felt a strange chill. News of the twins' rescue, discreetly reported in the local newspapers, reached his ears, mingled with the town's whispers. He tried to convince himself that it was just a coincidence, that those couldn't be his nephews and nieces. After all, he had left them in a place where no one would find them. A lion. The idea was absurd, a fantasy. But a pang of anxiety began to corrode his false tranquility like a slow poison. He remembered the cold night, the deadly silence of the forest. And now, the community spoke of babies found, protected by an animal. His luxurious life plans, once so solid, suddenly seemed threatened by a ghost from the past, a shadow of guilt that he tried to ignore with all his might, but which insisted on whispering in his thoughts. The search for justice became a silent but powerful cry, echoing in people's hearts. Everyone wanted to know who had committed such barbarity. Inspector Almeida, with his team, began to build a profile. Someone without emotional ties, with access to the babies and a vehicle. The lion's story, though extraordinary, served as a beacon, illuminating the darkness of cruelty. It showed that, even in the depths of human wickedness, hope and protection could emerge from where least expected, through the purest and wildest of natures. The twins' journey, begun under the vigilant gaze of a king of the jungle, was now a testament to life's resilience and the incessant search for a home and for justice. The community waited, with heavy hearts and hopeful souls, for the outcome of this story that had already changed everyone. Arthur tried to push away the disturbing thoughts, but they clung to his mind like poisonous ivy. Every murmur about the lion's babies seemed a distant echo of his own guilty conscience. He leafed through the local newspapers with forced disdain, his eyes fixed on the headlines that, in a veiled way, spoke of the miracle and the search for justice. "What nonsense," he grumbled to himself, but his hands trembled slightly as he turned the pages, and breakfast, once a pleasure, now tasted bitter. The mansion, which should have been his refuge of luxury and tranquility, suddenly seemed empty and oppressive, its halls echoing the silence of his solitude and growing anxiety. While Arthur struggled with his inner demons, Inspector Almeida intensified the investigation. He had set up a small, improvised headquarters at the ranger station, where forest maps were spread across a table marked with circles and arrows. Elias and Marta, the forest rangers, were his main informants, reliving every detail of the rescue night with impressive precision. The lion. He was there, Inspector. He wasn't a common wild animal. He seemed a guardian, Elias repeated, his voice still full of awe. Almeida, though skeptical about the mystical aspect, recognized the importance of the lion as a point of reference for the location of the abandonment. He needed facts, a route, a vehicle, a name. The community, in turn, transformed pain into action, Volunteers took turns at the ranger station, bringing food for the team and offering help of any kind. Donations for the twins piled up, filling a small room with cribs, clothes, and toys. A nurse, Donna Clara, a woman with white hair and a sweet gaze, took responsibility for organizing everything, her eyes welling up with each new contribution. "They will have everything they need," she promised, stroking a little romper. "More than they had at the beginning of their lives." The solidarity was a balm for the town's wounded soul, a counterpoint to the cruelty that had shocked everyone. In the corridors of the improvised hospital, Anjo and Estrella continued their journey of recovery. Their cries were now stronger, their movements more vigorous. Dr. Ricardo, seeing them play with their own fingers, felt a warmth in his chest. "They are a miracle," he told his team, a genuine smile lighting up his face. The baby's vitality was a constant reminder of what was at stake, of why justice needed to be done. Arthur, oblivious to the wave of love and hope that enveloped the twins, felt the net closing in. He began to avoid going out, fearing curious glances or uncomfortable questions. Every car that passed along his mansion's road seemed to slow down, every shadow a potential investigator. The fortune he so coveted now seemed a burden, a chain binding him to a terrible secret. The image of the tiny faces, which he had tried to erase from memory, resurfaced in his nightmares, mixed with the distant roar of a lion. He knew that the peace he sought was an illusion, and that destiny, with its intricate web, was about to weave a new chapter in his life, a chapter of reckoning. Greed had blinded him, but the truth, like a patient predator, was approaching, relentless. Greed had blinded him, but the truth, like a patient predator, was approaching, relentless. Arthur tried, with all his might, to push away the image of the babies and the lion, but they refused to disappear. Every noise in the mansion, every leaf falling at the window, seemed a warning, a reminder of the heinous act he had committed. He spent sleepless nights, his sleep disturbed by vivid nightmares, where the lion's roar mingled with the cries of the little ones, and the animal's golden eyes pursued him in the darkness. His gestures became abrupt, his speech harsh, and the housekeeper, a discreet woman of few words, noticed the change, but preferred to keep her distance. The peace he hoped to find with his fortune was a mirage, replaced by a growing anguish that consumed him from within. While Arthur sank deeper into his own prison of guilt, Inspector Almeida and his team worked tirelessly. The forest had been scoured again, this time with more attention to detail. One of the rangers, a young, newly trained man named Lucas, with keen eyes and contagious enthusiasm, found something that had gone unnoticed in the first search. A small piece of fabric, caught on a low branch a few meters from where the basket had been found. It was a fragment of the thin blanket that enveloped the twins, but this piece had delicate, almost imperceptible embroidery, with intertwined initials. A.M. Almeida picked up the fabric with gloves, his expression serious. "This is different," he murmured, examining the embroidery with a magnifying glass. "It's not a common blanket. It could be a clue." He instructed Lucas to take the fragment for analysis, while he himself delved into the records of local families who had recently lost loved ones, especially those with significant inheritances or ties to children. The inspector's intuition told him that the key lay in the baby's origin, not just the act of abandonment. In the corridors of the ranger station, joy was palpable. Anjo and Estrella, now a month old, were thriving. Their small, curious eyes followed the nurse's movements, and their toothless smiles melted hearts. Donna Clara, the head nurse, held them with immense affection, singing lullabies. "They are proof that love always finds a way," she said, her eyes moist. The community continued to send donations, and a small room, once empty, now overflowed with colorful toys and clothes, a true nest of affection. News of the blanket fragment spread discreetly among the investigation team. The embroidery, with the initials AM, was compared to fabric samples and local seamstresses' records, but nothing seemed to fit. It was then that an elderly woman, Donna Rosa, a former seamstress who had worked for the region's most traditional families, heard the buzz. She presented herself at the ranger station, her eyes fixed on the image of the embroidery Elias was showing in a local newspaper. "I know that stitch," she said, her voice trembling, pointing to the design. "It's the pattern of Amelia Montero's family, Mr. Arthur's deceased wife. She herself embroidered it into a layette for the nephews and nieces who would be born. It was a special gift, made with much love." The silence in the room was deafening. Donna Rosa's words fell like a lightning bolt, illuminating the darkness of the investigation. Inspector Almeida felt a shiver run down his spine. Arthur, the widowed and cruel uncle. The pieces began to fall into place in a terrible and undeniable way. The truth, relentless, was finally revealing its face. The silence in the room was deafening. Donna Rosa's words fell like a lightning bolt, illuminating the darkness of the investigation. Inspector Almeida felt a shiver run down his spine. Arthur, the widowed and cruel uncle. The pieces began to fall into place in a terrible and undeniable way. The truth, relentless, was finally revealing its face. Almeida looked at Elias, whose face was pale, and at Lucas, whose eyes were wide with shock. The revelation was a punch to the gut, a confirmation of the wickedness they had feared. Donna Rosa, her voice choked with emotion, continued, "Amelia was such a good soul. She spoke so fondly of the nephews and nieces who would come, even before they were born. She wanted them to have something made by her, with love." Tears streamed down her wrinkled face, a mix of sadness for Amelia's memory and indignation at Arthur's cruelty. Inspector Almeida cleared his throat, trying to compose himself. "Donna Rosa, are you sure? This embroidery, is it unmistakable?" She nodded vigorously, wiping her eyes with a handkerchief. "Absolutely, Inspector. I myself taught Amelia to do that stitch. It's unique, like her soul." The confirmation was irrefutable. Almeida's intuition, which had once seemed a faint thread, now solidified into a chilling certainty. Arthur's greed, so evident in his reclusiveness and disinterest in his nephews and nieces, was the driving force behind everything. At the ranger station, the news spread like a dark whisper. Initial disbelief gave way to a wave of anger and sadness. The rangers, who had risked their lives to save the babies, felt a lump in their throats. Elias, with a clenched fist, could barely contain his indignation. He's a monster," he murmured, his voice hoarse. Marta, upon hearing the news, brought her hands to her mouth, her eyes welling up. The image of the protective lion, so noble and wild, contrasted brutally with human depravity. As justice began to weave its web, Arthur, in his isolated mansion, felt the air grow heavier, the solitude more suffocating. Every shadow seemed to move, every creak of the wood a step approaching. He tried to convince himself that it was just fatigue, but the truth was that fear was gnawing at him from within. He looked at his fortune, at the luxury objects that surrounded him, and felt an emptiness that no wealth could fill. The image of the tiny faces, now clearer in his mind, was a constant torment. The lion's roar, once a distant sound in his nightmares, now seemed to echo through the mansion's halls, a warning, a promise that what was hidden would be revealed. Inspector Almeida, with the new and crucial evidence, summoned his team. "We cannot make mistakes. We need more proof, a solid case. But now we know where to look." He instructed his men to gather all of Arthur's financial records, any document that might indicate a motive, a plan. The investigation, previously a blind search, now had a clear target: Justice, which had seemed so distant, was about to manifest itself. In the corridors of the improvised hospital, Anjo and Estrella, oblivious to the storm brewing around them, slept peacefully in their heated cribs. Their little chests rose and fell in a steady rhythm, a silent testament to life's resilience. Donna Clara, observing them, felt a peace that contrasted with the anguish of the investigation. "They are innocent," she whispered, caressing Anjo's tiny hand. "They deserve a future of love." The community, united in its solidarity, awaited the outcome, aware that the truth, however painful, was the first step towards healing and ensuring that goodness, after all, would always prevail over wickedness. Arthur's fate was sealed, and the twins' story, protected by a king of the jungle, was about to find its way to a home of love. Arthur, in his mansion, felt the weight of the world collapsing on him. The news of the embroidery's discovery, though not yet officially confirmed in his presence, seemed to float in the air, carried by the town's winds. Every knock on the door, every unexpected phone call, made his heart race. He locked himself in his office, his eyes fixed on the financial documents that once gave him so much pleasure. Now they were just cold papers, silent witnesses to an ambition that had led him to a precipice. The image of the twins' tiny faces, once a distant stain on his conscience, was now clear, relentless. Mixed with the roar he swore he heard coming from the forest, a sound that reminded him of his failure and the unexpected guardian. His fingers trembled as he held a glass of cognac, and the drink, which once calmed his nerves, now only increased his agitation. At the ranger station, Inspector Almeida's determination was unwavering. He knew that Donna Rosa's confession was the missing piece, but he needed a solid, irrefutable case. His team worked at an accelerated pace, cross-referencing information, checking Arthur's background, his movements in the days leading up to the abandonment. "We need everything," he instructed, his voice grave. "Any detail that connects Arthur Montero to the twins and that night." Elias and Marta, with their still latent anger, collaborated with renewed fervor. The idea that a man so close to the family could commit such an atrocity was a painful blow, but also a catalyst for the relentless pursuit of justice. Elias relived every moment of the rescue, searching for any clue that might have gone unnoticed, while Marta, her gaze fixed on the forest map, tried to visualize the route Arthur might have taken. The community, shocked by the revelation, transformed its indignation into even greater support for the twins. Donations kept pouring in, and volunteers took turns at the ranger station, offering help and affection. Donna Clara, with her wisdom and tenderness, organized the contributions, ensuring Anjo and Estrella had everything they needed. She held them in her lap, rocking them with soft songs, her eyes moist with emotion. "You are loved, my little ones," she whispered, a balm for their innocent souls. The baby's vitality was a constant reminder of the life Arthur tried to extinguish and of the resilience that nature and human love had cultivated. As the investigation advanced, Arthur felt the net tightening. The mansion, once a symbol of his victory over the world, was now a golden prison, where every shadow seemed to hide an accuser. He avoided the few staff, his eyes evasive, his posture hunched. The fortune he so valued seemed to drain of meaning, replaced by an existential void. He knew that time was running out, and that the truth, like a surging river, was about to overflow, sweeping away all his lies. Destiny, with its intricate web, was finally unraveling the final chapter of his greed, and justice, with firm and unwavering steps, was at the door. Arthur, in his mansion, felt the weight of the world collapsing on him. The news of the embroidery, though not yet official, seemed to float in the air, carried by the town's winds. Every knock on the door, every unexpected phone call made his heart race. He locked himself in the office, his eyes fixed on the financial documents that once gave him pleasure. Now they were just cold papers, witnesses to his ambition. The image of the twins' tiny faces, once a distant stain, was now clear, relentless, mixed with the roar he swore he heard, reminding him of his failure and the Guardian. His fingers trembled as he held a glass of cognac. The drink only increased his agitation. At the ranger station, Inspector Almeida's determination was unwavering. He knew that Donna Rosa's confession was crucial, but he needed an irrefutable case. His team worked at an accelerated pace, cross-referencing information, checking Arthur's background, his movements before the abandonment. "We need everything," he instructed, his voice grave. "Any detail that connects Arthur Montero to the twins and that night." Elias and Marta, with their latent anger, collaborated with renewed fervor. The atrocity by a family member was a blow, but it catalyzed the search for justice. Elias relived every moment of the rescue, searching for lost clues, while Marta, her gaze fixed on the forest map, tried to visualize the route Arthur might have taken. The community, shocked by the revelation, transformed indignation into support for the twins. Donations kept pouring in, and volunteers took turns at the ranger station, offering help and affection. Donna Clara, with her wisdom and tenderness, organized the contributions, ensuring Anjo and Estrella had what they needed. She held them in her lap, rocking them with soft songs, her eyes moist. "You are loved, my little ones," she whispered, a balm for their souls. The baby's vitality was a constant reminder of the life Arthur tried to extinguish, and of the resilience cultivated by nature and human love. As the investigation advanced, Arthur felt the net tightening. The mansion, once a symbol of his victory, was now a golden prison, where every shadow accused. He avoided the few staff, his eyes evasive, his posture hunched. His fortune lost its meaning, replaced by an existential void. He knew that time was running out, and that the truth, like a surging river, was about to overflow, sweeping away his lies. Destiny was unraveling the final chapter of his greed. Justice, firm, was at the door. Inspector Almeida, with the folder full of evidence, felt the weight of responsibility. The confrontation was approaching. Arthur would not be easy, but Anjo and Estrella, safe and loved, were his strength. Justice would be done, for them and for all who believed in the miracle of the lion and in human kindness. The town waited, holding its breath, for the outcome that would reveal darkness and light in people's hearts. The town waited, holding its breath, for the outcome that would reveal darkness and light in people's hearts. For Inspector Almeida, however, the wait had come to an end. The folder in his hands, filled with testimonies and the crucial embroidery evidence, was an irrefutable testimony. His eyes, once tired from the long journey, now shone with cold determination. He knew that the truth, however painful, was essential for the healing of that wounded community. The image of little Anjo and Estrella sleeping in their cribs was a constant reminder of why justice needed to be done. He summoned Elias and Marta for a final meeting. In the isolated mansion, Arthur was on the verge of collapse. The cognac no longer calmed his nerves, only intensified the feeling that the walls were closing in on him. Every creak of the wood, every shadow cast by the moonlight, seemed a harbinger of imminent doom. He rose from the leather armchair, pacing back and forth in the office, his heavy footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. His fingers, once steady when signing checks, now trembled uncontrollably. The fortune he so coveted lay untouched, unable to fill the existential void that consumed him. The image of the twins, with their innocent faces, mingled with the lion's roar in his nightmares, a symphony of guilt and fear. At the ranger station, Almeida explained the details of his strategy. "We need to be firm, but without commotion. Discretion is crucial to avoid panic and ensure everyone's safety. Elias nodded, his expression serious. "He won't make it easy, Inspector. He's a proud and calculating man." Marta, with her arms crossed, added, "But the truth carries a weight that all the world's wealth cannot silence." The team reviewed the search and arrest warrant, every word, every legal detail, so there would be no loopholes. The responsibility was immense, but the conviction that they were acting in the name of justice was even greater. Meanwhile, in the improvised hospital, life followed its purest and most hopeful course. Anjo and Estrella, now stronger and with curious eyes, were the center of unconditional love. Donna Clara, with her soft voice and gentle hands, fed them with a bottle, watching their tiny lips move. "They are our light," she murmured to a volunteer, her eyes moist with affection. The baby's room was filled with donations, a rainbow of clothes and toys, each item a gesture of solidarity. Human kindness, in its simplest and most powerful form, was an invisible shield that enveloped the twins, protecting them from the darkness that was about to be unveiled. Arthur felt time slipping through his fingers like fine sand. He approached the window, observing the darkness of the forest in the distance, the same place where he had committed his unthinkable act. A shiver ran down his spine. He tried to rationalize, to convince himself that it was all a conspiracy, that the embroidery was a coincidence, but the voice of reason was drowned out by the chorus of his conscience. He saw a car slowly approach along the private road, its lights cutting through the night fog. It was not a common car. It was not a visitor. His heart pounded, beating erratically in his chest. The moment he so feared tried to push away was finally at his door. Inspector Almeida, alongside Elias and Marta, stepped out of the vehicle. The headlight illuminated the mansion's imposing facade, a symbol of the fortune and cruelty that resided there. Almeida took a deep breath, feeling the cold night air. He looked at his companions, who were ready. Justice, with firm and unwavering steps, was about to manifest itself. The truth, like a surging river, was finally overflowing, sweeping away all the lies and greed that had blinded Arthur. The night's silence was broken only by the sound of the team's determined footsteps approaching the door. The final chapter of Arthur's greed was about to be written. The heavy knock on the door echoed through the mansion, breaking the oppressive silence and making Arthur jump in the leather armchair. He knew. His breath caught in his throat, eyes wide with terror and disbelief. The cognac in his glass swayed dangerously, almost spilling onto the Persian rug. He tried to stand, but his legs felt like lead, unable to support the weight of his guilt. The image of the lion, with its golden, penetrating eyes, and the innocent faces of the twins, now so clear, flooded his mind, forming an accusing chorus that tormented him. The door opened slowly, revealing the imposing silhouette of Inspector Almeida, flanked by Elias and Marta, their expressions serious and determined. The light from Elias's flashlight cut through the darkness of the hall, illuminating Arthur's pale, sweaty face, which seemed to have aged years in seconds. "Mr. Arthur Montero?" Almeida asked, his voice calm but firm, which seemed to echo through every corner of the vast room, filling the air with undeniable authority. Arthur could not answer. He merely nodded, an almost imperceptible movement of his head, his lips dry, his throat tight. He felt the ground beneath his feet waver, as if the world itself were crumbling. Almeida entered, followed by his team, their steps firm and decisive on the cold marble. Elias carried a folder and a small package, which seemed to hold a heavy secret. Marta watched Arthur with a mix of revulsion and deep sadness, her eyes fixed on the hunched figure of the man, who once exuded arrogance and now seemed a ghost. "We have some questions for you, Mr. Arthur," the inspector continued, approaching the coffee table, where he placed the folder with a precise gesture. It concerns the abandonment of the twins, Anjo and Estrella, that winter night. Upon hearing the names, Arthur visibly flinched, a shiver running down his spine. He tried to force a disdainful smile, a mask of indifference that no longer served him, but his facial muscles refused to obey, betraying his panic. "I don't know what you're talking about, Inspector. I have nothing to do with it," he managed to stammer, his voice hoarse and trembling, an unconscious confession of his fragility and despair. Almeida ignored the pathetic denial. With a slow and deliberate movement, Elias unwrapped the small piece of fabric. It was the fragment of the thin blanket, now a heavy symbol, with the delicate initials AM embroidered in one corner. Almeida held it up, showing it to Arthur, who could barely tear his gaze away. "Dona Amelia Monteiro, your deceased wife, embroidered this with her own hands. For the nephews and nieces who would be born, a gift of love. Donna Rosa, the seamstress, confirmed every detail to us." The words fell like stones upon Arthur, crushing any last shred of hope. The color completely drained from his face. The mask of indifference crumbled completely, revealing an abyssal fear and the naked truth of his cruelty. He recognized Amelia's work, her dedication, the pure love she had put into every stitch, a brutal contrast to his own greed. The memory of his wife's goodness, now a silent accusation, was a devastating blow that made him stagger. Tears welled up in Arthur's eyes, not from genuine remorse, but from panic, rage, and overwhelming despair. He brought his hands to his face, futilely trying to hide his shame and imminent defeat. The lion's roar, once a distant nightmare, now seemed to fill the room, a guttural sound of justice that echoed in his soul. He felt the weight of every lie he had told, every tormented sleepless night, every moment of greed that had led him to this precipice. The fortune he had coveted with such ferocity now seemed insignificant, a pile of worthless dust, unable to save him. The truth, relentless and cold, had definitively caught up with him. He had nowhere to run, nor how to deny the undeniable. While Arthur collapsed into his own prison of guilt and despair, far away, in the improvised hospital, Anjo and Estrella slept deeply. Their little chests rose and fell in a serene and steady rhythm, oblivious to the storm raging over their uncle. Donna Clara, sitting beside the cribs, watched them with a tender smile, her eyes moist with affection. The soft light from the bedside lamp illuminated their innocent faces, a beacon of hope and unconditional love that defied the darkness. The community, united in its solidarity and generosity, had created a sanctuary of affection for the twins, a temporary home where human kindness flourished abundantly. Life, in its purest and most resilient form, prevailed over wickedness. Justice, with its firm and unwavering steps, had finally reached the door of greed, and the light of truth was about to banish the darkness once and for all. The silence in Arthur's mansion was now an eloquent testament to his defeat, the end of a dark chapter. The silence in Arthur's mansion was now an eloquent testament to his defeat, the end of a dark chapter. He slumped into the armchair, his body trembling uncontrollably, his eyes fixed on the embroidered piece of fabric. The image of Amelia, his wife, arose in his mind, not as the woman he had loved, but as a figure of light confronting him with the darkness of his soul. Tears streamed freely down his face, no longer from panic, but from a deep and bitter shame. He brought his hands to his face, muffled sobs filling the heavy air of the room. I don't know what came over me," he murmured, his voice almost inaudible, a stammered confession lost amidst his groans. Inspector Almeida observed the scene with contained sadness. There was no satisfaction in seeing a man disintegrate like this, only the realization that greed had corroded Arthur's humanity. "Mr. Arthur," Almeida said, his voice softer now, but still laden with authority, "your confession won't bring back lost time, but it's the first step towards justice." He motioned to Elias, who approached with handcuffs. Arthur did not resist. His shoulders slumped, and he allowed the ranger to lead him out of the mansion that was once his refuge and now had become his prison. Marta watched, feeling a mix of relief and compassion. Justice was being done, but the human cost was immense. In the days that followed, news of Arthur Montero's arrest and conviction spread like wildfire through the town. The community, which had previously been in shock, now felt a palpable relief. Arthur was tried and convicted of child abandonment, and the fortune he so coveted was used to create a fund for the twins, ensuring them a safe and dignified future. The story of the protective lion, Amelia's embroidery, and the baby's resilience became a living legend, a testament to unexpected redemption through nature and human kindness. Far from the now empty mansion, in the improvised hospital, Anjo and Estrella thrived. Donna Clara, with her generous heart and wisdom, had become a maternal figure for them. After weeks of care and a careful search for a loving home, the twins' fate was sealed. A young couple from the neighboring town, who had followed the poignant story in the newspapers, offered to adopt them. They were simple people, but with immense love to give, and a welcoming home that seemed tailor-made for the little ones. The day of Anjo and Estrella's farewell from the hospital was a mix of tears and smiles. Donna Clara handed them into the arms of their new parents, her eyes moist, but with a deep peace in her heart. "They are proof that love always finds a way," she whispered, stroking Estrella's hair. Elias and Marta, present at the intimate ceremony, felt that their role as guardians had come to a happy end. The lion, the true silent hero, remained in the forest, his presence a constant reminder that wildlife, in its purity, had taught an unforgettable lesson about protection and altruism. Anjo and Estrella, in their new home, would grow up surrounded by affection. The story of their rescue told in hushed tones, a tale of miracle and hope that would echo for generations, reminding everyone that, even in the greatest adversities, the light of kindness and human connection always prevails. Anjo and Estrella, in their new home, would grow up surrounded by affection, the story of their rescue told in hushed tones, a tale of miracle and hope that would echo for generations, reminding everyone that, even in the greatest adversities, the light of kindness and human connection always prevails. And so it was. The years unfolded like the pages of a gentle book. Ana and Pedro, their adoptive parents, embraced the twins with a devotion that healed the invisible scars of the past. Their home, once silent, filled with the sound of children's laughter, hesitant first steps, and babbled words that were music to their ears. Anjo, with his innate curiosity, and Estrella, with her serene sweetness, grew like two rare flowers, watered by unconditional love. The story of their rescue, of the majestic lion who had protected them, became a living legend in the town. It was not a distant fairy tale, but a palpable truth, a constant reminder of nature's capacity to surprise and human kindness to manifest in the darkest moments. The town's children, upon hearing the story, looked at the forest with new respect, imagining the golden-maned guardian. The forest, once viewed with some apprehension, transformed into a symbol of mystery and protection, a place where the miracle had happened. Donna Clara, with her silver hair and welcoming smile, remained an honorary grandmother to the twins. Her visits were always eagerly awaited, and she rocked them in her arms, telling stories and whispering words of love that only the purest hearts could understand. Elias and Marta, who married a few years later, became aunt and uncle figures, always present at birthdays and celebrations, their eyes reflecting pride and gratitude for having been part of such a grand miracle. They saw in Anjo and Estrella living proof that justice, though sometimes slow, always finds its way, and that love is the most powerful force in the universe. Arthur Montero's fortune, as promised, was entirely allocated to a fund for the twins, ensuring them education and a future free from material worries. Arthur's name, once a synonym for power and greed, was now just a distant shadow, a reminder of what darkness can do to a soul. His story served as a silent counterpoint to the light that Anjo and Estrella radiated, showing that true wealth lies in compassion and altruism. The community, united by the experience, flourished in solidarity. The Forest Ranger Station, now a community center, displayed a small plaque in honor of the guardian lion, and each year, on the day of the rescue, the town celebrated the Festival of Hope, an event that strengthened the bonds between people and the belief in a better world. It was a day of gratitude, remembrance, and renewed faith in humanity's capacity to rise again and to love. Anjo and Estrella grew up knowing their story, not as a burden, but as a testament to their strength and the love that surrounded them. They learned to cherish every gesture of affection, every smile, every sunrise. Their lives were the personification of triumph, resilience, and unexpected redemption. The story of the lion and the twins spread beyond the town's borders, inspiring hearts and minds, a tale that proved that, even in the wildest and most inhospitable corners of existence, goodness and human connection always, invariably, find a way to prevail, weaving a tapestry of hope that never unravels. Years passed, and the tapestry of hope woven by Anjo and Estrella's story unfolded, richer and more vibrant with each thread. The twins, now young adults, were a living testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of love. Anjo, with an adventurous soul and eyes that carried the wisdom of the forest, dedicated himself to biology and conservation. He spent hours at the university, absorbing details of wildlife, especially big cats, driven by an undeniable, almost mystical connection. Estrella, with serene grace, her compassion guided her to nursing. She became a dedicated professional with a gentle touch that soothed troubled hearts, believing that every life was a miracle to be cared for. Ana and Pedro, their parents, watched them with overflowing pride. Their home, once a refuge, was now a vibrant household, filled with conversations about scientific discoveries and patient stories. Donna Clara, with silver hair, was the beloved matriarch, her eyes shining as she watched her grandchildren prosper. Elias and Marta, with young children of their own, maintained the annual Festival of Hope, uniting the community to remember the miracle. Anjo and Estrella, discreet about their story, actively participated with warm smiles and grateful glances. The forest, for them, was not abandonment, but salvation. Anjo, in his research, walked its trails, not seeking the lion, but feeling its presence, an invisible guardian that had shaped his destiny. He spoke with respect about animal intelligence and altruism, challenging the common perception of ferocity. Estrella, on her days off, visited the ranger station, now an environmental education center. The Guardian Lion plaque was a reminder of life's interconnectedness. She organized events for children, teaching them to protect nature and reach out to the vulnerable. Arthur's fortune, transformed into a fund for the twins, was the seed of a promising future. But the true wealth that Anjo and Estrella cultivated was that of the spirit. They used part of the resources to support conservation and assistance to at-risk children, honoring the legacy of love and protection. One sunny day, Anjo and Estrella, already in their 20s, sat under an ancient tree at the edge of the forest. Anjo held a book on animal behavior. Estrella read a thank-you letter from a family they had helped. "It's incredible, isn't it, Estrella?" Anjo said, closing the book and looking at the horizon. "How something so terrible generated so much beauty and purpose." Estrella smiled, her eyes moist. "It's proof, Anjo, that love is the most powerful force. It found us in the darkness, embraced us, and showed that life always flourishes. She touched the lion brooch she wore, a gift from Donna Clara. The lion taught us that goodness can come from unexpected sources, and that human connection, when true, is unbreakable. Anjo nodded, his gaze fixed on the green immensity, and that justice in the end is not just punishment, but the restoration of hope. They stood up hand in hand, feeling the breeze that carried the scent of earth and leaves. Their story was not just a miracle, but a reminder. Even in the face of cruelty, the light of compassion and human resilience prevails, weaving a future where love and hope are the most beautiful of legacies. With each step, they carried the legend of the lion, the wisdom of Donna Clara, the affection of Ana and Pedro, and the unwavering certainty that life in its purest essence is a gift to be celebrated and shared.